Every town has a story, passed from one whisper to the next. Some are just legends. Others, no one can explain. Tonight, we're reopening the files on the tales passed through generations. Were they just meant to be tall tales or warnings? You found your way to Urban Legends Untold. The Bunny Man, Virginia's blood-stained bridge. Just outside Clifton, Virginia, hidden among dense forests and quiet backroads, sits an old railroad overpass. By day, it looks ordinary, a narrow concrete tunnel beneath rusted train tracks. But after sunset, people don't linger. Locals call it Bunny Man Bridge, and according to legend, if you're still standing beneath it at midnight, you won't be alone. The story has dozens of versions. Some say a bus carrying violent psychiatric patients crashed nearby sometime in the early 1900s. Most of the inmates escaped into the woods. Authorities eventually found every one of them, except one. A man who disappeared without a trace. For weeks, hunters discovered the remains of rabbits hanging from trees. Their bodies had been skinned, their carcasses left as warnings. Police believed the missing patient had survived by eating wild animals. Then the killings changed. Instead of rabbits, people started disappearing. Witnesses claimed to see a man wearing a white rabbit costume, carrying a blood-covered axe. He became known as the Bunny Man. Another version tells a darker story. A teenage boy, bullied by classmates and driven to madness, put on a rabbit suit one Halloween night. He murdered his family, then hanged himself from the railroad bridge. Ever since, his ghost returns every Halloween, waiting beneath the tracks for anyone foolish enough to trespass. Some say he swings his axe, others say he simply appears, silent, watching, waiting. Like most urban legends, the stories contradict each other. Different years, different names, different victims, but strangely, they all lead back to the same place, the bridge. Which raises an unsettling question. If none of these stories are true, why has this location terrified people for generations? The answer begins in 1970. Unlike the legend, this part actually happened. In October of that year, newspapers reported a bizarre incident in Fairfax County. A man dressed entirely in white approached a couple sitting in their parked car. He shouted that they were trespassing. Then, he threw a hatchet through their windshield. The couple escaped unharmed. Police searched the woods, but the attacker vanished. Just weeks later, another report surfaced. A construction security guard encountered the same strange figure, again dressed in white, again carrying an axe. This time, the man screamed at workers for trespassing before disappearing into the trees. Despite multiple investigations, police never identified him. The newspapers gave him a nickname, the Bunny Man. Here's where things become fascinating. The real attacks happened, but they weren't connected to the bridge. They occurred miles away. Yet over the decades, the true story merged with local folklore. Rumors spread from neighborhood to neighborhood. Each person added another detail: a psychiatric hospital, escaped killers, ghosts, executions, murdered teenagers. Soon, no one could separate fact from fiction. Today, Bunny Man Bridge has become one of America's most famous haunted locations. Visitors travel from across the country. Some arrive just before midnight. Others bring cameras. Many expect nothing more than an old bridge, until they hear something. Scratching, metal clanging overhead, heavy footsteps crossing the tracks. Of course, freight trains still use the railway. Animals roam the woods. Old concrete tunnels echo in strange ways. Most sounds have perfectly ordinary explanations, but not every visitor leaves convinced. Some claim they saw a figure standing in the darkness. Others insist something chased them back to their cars. A few say photographs taken beneath the bridge later revealed a shadow where no one had been standing. None of these stories have ever been verified, yet they continue to spread, year after year. Psychologists call this legend tripping. It's when people visit places already expecting something terrifying to happen. Every sound becomes suspicious. every shadow feels alive. The human brain is remarkably good at turning uncertainty into certainty, especially when fear enters the equation. But sometimes, even skeptics admit they experienced something they couldn't explain. Whether that's the power of suggestion or something waiting beneath the bridge depends entirely on who you ask. Because urban legends rarely survive on evidence alone. They survive because someone swears, "It happened to my cousin. My friend saw it. My grandfather warned me never to go there." Those stories are passed down, retold, changed, until eventually, the legend becomes more powerful than the truth itself. So, is Bunnyman Bridge haunted? Was there ever an escaped killer? Did anyone truly die beneath those railroad tracks? History says, probably not. But history can't explain why generations of strangers who have never met one another continue describing the same feeling when they stand beneath that bridge after dark. The overwhelming sense that someone is standing just outside the reach of the headlights, watching, waiting, and hoping you'll stay a little longer. Urban legends aren't just scary stories. They're reflections of the places we fear, the questions we can't answer, and the mysteries that refuse to disappear. Whether the Bunny Man is nothing more than a misunderstood vandal or something far darker, one thing is certain. As long as that bridge stands, the legend isn't going anywhere. And if you ever find yourself driving through Clifton, Virginia, maybe don't stop beneath the bridge. The Green Man, the legend of Charlie No-Face. On lonely roads throughout western Pennsylvania, drivers have spent decades telling the same story. Late at night, when the streets are empty and the only sound is the hum of tires against the pavement, a strange figure appears. He walks alone. His skin glows a pale green beneath the moonlight. His face is barely recognizable. Some say he's a ghost, others believe he's a monster, and some insist if you stop your car and speak to him, he'll vanish before your eyes. They call him the Green Man, or Charlie No-Face. But unlike most urban legends, this one has a name, a history, and a heartbreaking truth. Long before the internet spread stories across the world, teenagers in western Pennsylvania whispered about a man who wandered the roads after dark. Some claimed he had escaped from an insane asylum. Others said he'd been struck by lightning and cursed to roam forever. There were stories that electricity flowed through his body, that touching him meant certain death. Some even believed he wasn't human at all, just an apparition, doomed to walk the same roads every night. The stories changed depending on who was telling them, but one detail never did. If you drove long enough, you just might see him. Groups of teenagers began piling into cars after sunset, not because they wanted to avoid him, but because they wanted to find him. It became something of a rite of passage. Drive the back roads, turn off your headlights, roll down the windows, and wait. Most nights, nothing happened, but every so often, someone would come back with a story. His real name was Raymond Theodore Robinson. He wasn't a ghost, he wasn't a murderer, and he certainly wasn't a monster. He was born in Pennsylvania in 1910. As a young boy, he climbed a utility pole while trying to get a better look into a bird's nest. Accounts differ slightly on exactly what happened next, but nearly every version agrees on one terrible moment. He came into contact with an electrical line carrying thousands of volts. The shock should have killed him. Instead, he survived. But the injuries were devastating. He lost both of his eyes, most of his nose, one of his arms, and much of his face was permanently disfigured. Against all odds, he lived, in a time long before reconstructive surgery could offer much help. Raymond faced a world that often judged people by their appearance. Children stared, adults looked away, some people were frightened, others were simply cruel. So, to avoid drawing attention, he made a simple decision. He would leave home only after dark, every evening. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, Raymond began taking long walks through the quiet country roads near his home. Sometimes he'd walk for miles. He enjoyed the peace, the cool night air, the silence. For him, Nighttime offered something daytime rarely did: privacy. Eventually, people noticed. Drivers passing along State Route 351 would spot a lone man walking with careful steps along the shoulder. "The Green Man is out tonight." The nickname likely came from another rumor, that the electrical accident had permanently turned his skin green. In reality, his skin wasn't green at all, although under old car headlights and dim streetlights, his complexion could sometimes appear pale or tinted, enough to convince anyone already expecting something supernatural, especially in the dark. As more people searched for him, something unexpected happened. Instead of running away, many stopped to talk. Teenagers introduced themselves. Some asked if they could take photographs. Others offered him cigarettes or a cold soda. Raymond was known to be remarkably kind, soft-spoken, patient. Even after years of being treated like an attraction, he often smiled, or at least as much as he could. Many who met him later admitted they felt ashamed. They had come looking for a monster. Instead, they found a gentle man simply enjoying an evening walk. One location became forever tied to the legend: an abandoned railroad tunnel not far from where Raymond often walked. Today, it's commonly called the Green Man Tunnel. People still visit it, mostly after dark. Some park outside, others walk inside carrying only flashlights. The tunnel itself is silent, cool, and unnervingly dark. Even though Raymond never lived there, the location became inseparable from his story. Visitors claim they've seen strange shadows, heard footsteps echoing behind them, or spotted a figure standing at the opposite end, only for it to disappear moments later. Most likely, it's simply another case of expectation shaping perception, but legends have a way of changing ordinary places forever. Raymond Robinson passed away in 1985, yet decades later, people still tell stories about the Green Man. Some insist they've seen him walking. Others claim his ghost still appears along the same roads. But perhaps the strangest part isn't the ghost stories. It's how quickly people forgot the truth. The real Raymond Robinson survived unimaginable pain. He never sought fame. He never tried to frighten anyone. He simply adapted to a life he never chose. Urban legends often ask us to fear what's hiding in the darkness. But maybe this story asks a different question. Why were people afraid of Raymond in the first place? Was it because he looked different? Because they didn't understand him? Or because it's easier to invent monsters than confront our own discomfort? Perhaps the legend says more about us than it ever did about him. If you find yourself driving through western Pennsylvania late at night, and you happen to pass an old country road, you probably won't see the Green Man. But if you do, remember this: the real Raymond Robinson wasn't haunting those roads. He was simply taking a walk, trying to find a little peace in a world that rarely gave him any. Sometimes, the saddest legends are the ones that are true. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. Imagine you're driving home late at night. The roads are empty. The radio crackles with static. Then, just beyond your headlights, someone is standing on the side of the road. They're alone, cold, silent. You stop. They climb into your car without saying much. You drive for several miles in complete silence, until you glance into the rearview mirror. The back seat is empty. No door ever opened. No footsteps echoed into the darkness. Your passenger has vanished. It's one of the oldest urban legends ever recorded. A story told in nearly every country, across generations, with thousands of witnesses claiming it happened to them. Tonight, we're uncovering the mystery of the Vanishing Hitchhiker. A story older than the automobile. It may sound like a modern ghost story, but versions of this legend existed long before cars. Centuries ago, travelers on horseback told stories of mysterious strangers who appeared on lonely roads. Some asked for a ride, others simply walked beside them. When they reached a crossroads, the stranger disappeared without a trace. As horse-drawn wagons gave way to automobiles, the legend evolved. The ghost no longer rode beside a wagon. Instead, they climbed into the passenger seat. The setting changed, but the ending never did. The story usually begins on a rainy night. A driver notices a young woman standing beside the road. She's often wearing a white dress. Sometimes she's barefoot. Sometimes she's shivering from the cold. Feeling sorry for her, the driver pulls over. She quietly thanks them and climbs inside. She rarely makes conversation. When asked where she's going, she gives an address. Nothing more. The drive continues in silence until the driver reaches the destination. They turn toward the passenger seat, and she's gone. Confused, the driver knocks on the front door of the house. An elderly woman answers. When they explain what happened, her expression changes. She quietly says, "That was my daughter. She died years ago in a car accident. Every year, she tries to come home." Perhaps the most famous version comes from Chicago. Locals call her Resurrection Mary. For nearly a century, drivers have reported picking up a young blonde woman dressed in white near Resurrection Cemetery. She asks for a ride. She speaks politely. Sometimes she gives directions, but as the car approaches the cemetery gates, she disappears, without warning, without a sound. Some drivers claim she simply fades away. Others insist she opened the door while the vehicle was still moving, only to vanish before touching the ground. The reports became so common that newspapers began covering them. Police received calls. Paranormal investigators visited the cemetery, yet no explanation ever satisfied everyone. Year after year, the sightings continued. What's truly fascinating is that this story isn't unique to America. In the United Kingdom, drivers tell stories of soldiers who disappear from the back seat. In the Philippines, the mysterious passenger is often said to be a woman in mourning. Across Latin America, travelers speak of spectral brides. Japan has stories of ghostly passengers who quietly request rides through mountain roads. Even in South Africa, there are reports of phantom hitchhikers along isolated highways. Different cultures, different languages, different ghosts, yet somehow, the same story. How is that possible? Folklorists have studied the Vanishing Hitchhiker for decades. Some believe it's a cautionary tale, a warning about driving too fast or ignoring strangers in need. Others argue it reflects our fear of death. The passenger represents unfinished business. Psychologists offer another possibility. Driving long distances at night can alter perception. Fatigue, darkness, rain, loneliness. Our brains begin filling in missing details, especially when we're expecting something unusual. Memory itself isn't perfect. Over time, stories become sharper, details change. Eventually, people begin remembering events that never happened exactly as they recall them. Not every report is easy to dismiss. Some drivers insist the passenger left behind a scarf, only for it to disappear the next morning. Others say the seat remained cold for hours. Several stories describe the ghost giving an address that belonged to someone who had died decades earlier. In a handful of cases, drivers claimed the passenger knew details about their personal lives, things no stranger should have known. None of these stories have ever been conclusively verified, but they refuse to disappear, just like the hitchhiker herself. Maybe it's because everyone has driven alone at night. Everyone has imagined seeing something just beyond the reach of their headlights. The Vanishing Hitchhiker taps into a universal fear, that the road isn't as empty as it seems, that every stranger has a story, and that sometimes those stories don't end when life does. So, what if you were driving home tonight, and someone appeared beside the road? Would you stop? Would you offer them a ride? Or would you keep driving, wondering for the rest of your life who they were? History can't tell us whether ghosts truly walk our highways. Science can't confirm the stories told by countless drivers across generations. But legends don't survive because they're proven. They survive because someone, somewhere, swears it happened to them. And maybe, one day someone else will pull over on a lonely road, open the passenger door, and unknowingly become the next person to tell the tale. The Bell Witch, America's most terrifying haunting. Most ghost stories fade into legend over time, but one haunting became so infamous that even President Andrew Jackson reportedly claimed he wanted nothing to do with it after experiencing something he couldn't explain. This is the story of the Bell Witch. It began in 1817, near the small farming community of Adams, Tennessee. Farmer John Bell noticed something strange while walking his fields. He spotted a bizarre animal unlike anything he'd ever seen. It had the body of a dog, the head of a rabbit, and vanished before he could get close. At first, he dismissed it as his imagination. Then the noises started. Every night, the Bell family heard unexplained scratching on the walls, chains dragging across the floor, and knocking at the doors. Whenever they rushed outside to investigate, there was nothing there. As the weeks passed, the disturbances grew worse. The Bell family's youngest daughter, Betsy, became the main target. She woke to invisible hands pulling her hair, slapping her face, and yanking her blankets away while she screamed for help. Her family searched the room repeatedly but found no one. Soon, the unseen presence found its voice. At first it whispered, then it spoke in full sentences. It called itself Kate. The entity could reportedly quote scripture, sing hymns, carry on conversations, and reveal private information about visitors that no stranger should have known. News spread quickly, and curious neighbors traveled from miles away hoping to witness the strange events themselves. Many left convinced they had. One of the most famous visitors was Andrew Jackson, years before he became president of the United States. According to the legend, as Jackson's group approached the Bell farm, their wagon suddenly stopped in the middle of the road. The horses strained with all their strength, but the wagon refused to move. Then an unseen voice echoed through the trees. "You may proceed. I'll see you tonight." The wagon immediately rolled forward as if nothing had happened. That evening, Jackson's men reportedly experienced objects flying through the room and invisible blows striking them while they slept. By morning, Jackson is said to have declared he'd rather fight an entire army than face the Bell Witch again. Whether that story is true or not, it's become one of the most famous parts of the legend, but the haunting wasn't over. The entity became increasingly hostile toward John Bell himself. Witnesses claimed his health rapidly declined while the voice openly announced it intended to kill him. In December of 1820, John Bell died under mysterious circumstances. After his death, the family discovered a small vial of dark liquid near his bed. According to the story, the Bell Witch proudly claimed responsibility, saying she had poisoned him. To test the substance, someone reportedly gave a drop to a cat, which died almost instantly. The Bell Witch then laughed throughout the house. Following John Bell's death, the activity slowly faded. Before disappearing, the voice allegedly promised it would return in 7 years. Some believed it did. Others claim the spirit still lingers around Adams, Tennessee, particularly near what is now known as the Bell Witch Cave, where visitors continue to report strange sounds, unexplained voices, and an overwhelming feeling that something is watching them. More than 200 years later, no one knows exactly what happened to the Bell family. Was it an elaborate hoax, mass hysteria, or did something truly unexplainable haunt that Tennessee farm? Whatever the truth may be, the Bell Witch remains one of America's oldest and most unsettling paranormal legends. Sometimes the stories that refuse to die are the ones that make us wonder if they were ever just stories at all. The legend ends here, or maybe this is where it begins. Until next time, keep your lights on.